So good afternoon. Thank you for attending the DC Locally Made Grant Information Session. This information session will be conducted by myself, Samantha Archibald. I serve as a program manager for the Minnesota Avenue Main Street program, which is a special initiative of the Washington Area Community Investment Fund. I know it's a mouthful, also known as WACIF. With me today is our guest presenter, Ms. Stephanie Thomas, who currently serves as a director of Great Streets and Retail with DEMPED, a district agency. This information session will be the first of many provided to Minnesota Avenue Main Street businesses as a way to create an informal space to keep businesses informed about business resources, information, and opportunities available, which oftentimes do not reach businesses located east of the river. So we hope that you find this information session helpful and that you invite other businesses to attend. We will also have a 2-question poll in the chat for you to answer. You can answer it during the presentation or during Q&A. We will leave room for additional 5 minutes to allow for people to complete the poll. We would like to know if you think this information is helpful, if this information session is helpful, so that we continue doing them. I'm going to start off the presentation by establishing some ground rules, and then I'll turn it over to Ms. Thomas to introduce herself and to start the presentation. So in terms of ground rules, we will mute all participants' microphones. For quality purposes, we ask that you leave questions until the end of the presentation. This meeting will be recorded. Please feel free to use the chat to answer any questions that you have during the presentation. We will review all questions at the end of the presentation. Again, we will have a 2-question poll in the chat for you to answer. Please feel free to complete it during or after the presentation. We will leave room for an additional 5 minutes to allow people an opportunity to complete the poll. Thank you for your feedback. Now I'll turn it over to Ms. Stephanie Thomas.
Wonderful, and thank you. It is indeed a joy to be able to join you, Samantha, and the Minnesota Avenue Main Street, and of course, leading the strategic initiative of the Washington Area Community Investment Fund to talk about this great initiative of the DC Locally Made Manufacturing Grant. I'm going to go ahead and, as Samantha introduced me a moment ago, I am the director for Great Streets and Retail, humbly serving in the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Economic Development. So allow me to share about this phenomenal grant opportunity. Right. And the presentation mode momentarily. Wonderful. So the FY 2021 DC Local Equity Access and Preservation Fund, otherwise known as DC LEAP, is another one of the many opportunities that our Mayor Bowser, and this administration is utilizing to support our small business community. And under the DC LEAP program, as we call it, are 3 separate solicitations that total $5.185 million. The FY 2021 Neighborhood Prosperity Fund, which is $3.185 million. The Nourish DC Fund, which is $1 million. And the DC Locally Made Manufacturing Grant, which is also $1 million. Today, we'll be talking about the FY 2021 DC Locally Made Manufacturing Grant. The FY 2021 DC Locally Made Manufacturing Grant really incentivizes and bolsters the Great Street Initiative to grow the district's local small business economy and bolster neighborhoods with inadequate access to retail opportunities. The purpose of Great Streets, for those of you who may not be as familiar with it, is to transform certain designated emerging commercial corridors, which are affectionately called Great Streets corridors, but are legislatively prescribed and called retail priority areas, to turn them and support them into being thriving, walkable, shoppable, and inviting neighborhood experiences. DEMPED invests in 13 retail priority areas with the goal of creating these livable, walkable, shoppable spaces across all 8 wards. And this program supports existing businesses and attracts new businesses. It helps increase the district's tax base and create new job opportunities. Again, under this solicitation, the award was $1 million. The notice of funding availability released on January 29, 2021, and the request for applications opened up on Friday, February 12, 2021. It does close on Monday, March 15th at 4 p.m. So Monday, March 15th, 2021 at 4 p.m., we need all the applications to be in. And certainly you can learn more information about DC LEAF and other initiatives that the Office of the Deputy Mayor of Planning and Economic Development is offering through www.demped.dc.gov. As I mentioned before, DC Locally Made seeks to incentivize the development of single-tenant buildings that can accommodate small manufacturing concerns or multiple tenant buildings, a multi-tenant building that can provide accommodation for manufacturers, post-incubators, and emerging growth companies that are engaged in consumer goods and some durable good production. DempEd recognizes that manufacturing supply chains have become more complicated, and that's in part due to multiple suppliers, and we know changes that have occurred in international trade and import-export regulations, and certainly the rapid acceleration of e-commerce demands have and absorption has contributed to some of these changes in our supply chain, and the exacerbation of the COVID-19 global pandemic and public health emergency. So we recognize the supply chains were distressed and in some cases disrupted, and there is increasing need to manufacture and procure consumer goods locally. We believe that the industrial sector can and will flourish in the district. It increases employment opportunities for local residents and offers light manufacturing opportunities that provide economic stability, that mitigate blight and add vibrancy to our dedicated, designated Great Street corridors. So let's talk a little bit about the funding priorities. The grant has identified the following funding priorities, and again, the RFA is on DempEd's website at demped.dc.gov under the DC LEAF carousel, which is right on the front page, and you can click on that and all the information is available as well. So under the funding priorities is number one, our Great Streets program, which you'll hear me talk about a little bit more. And I'll talk a little bit about the 13 retail priority areas that we are focused on providing support to. Second is that we'll seek to invest in small businesses. And these are businesses that are local business enterprise eligible, that have core operations that align with small to medium light manufacturing of fast consumer goods, so like dry products, processed foods, beverages, baby food, some consumer electronics, frozen foods, or other consumer durables, such as appliances and furniture equipment, that are locally operate or will operate within a designated Great Streets corridor, that maintain and or create new jobs with a commitment to hire district residents, that serve or may serve as a community anchor and impact the Great Street corridor and the community by its presence. And certainly that it can attract new customers and visitors to the area, and that will support existing retailers and the corridor's economic vitality. So what are these Great Street corridors? How do I know if I qualify? Well, the 13 Great Street corridors are Georgia Avenue Northwest, Georgia Avenue, H Street Bladensburg, going down Benning Road, Martin Luther King Jr. South Capitol Street, Southeast, Southwest, Minnesota Avenue, Benning Road, Northeast, Nannie Helen Burroughs Avenue, New York Avenue, Northeast, which was expanded recently through legislation in late summer of 2020, North Capitol Street, Northwest, Northeast, Pennsylvania Avenue, Southeast, Rhode Island Avenue, Northeast, Wisconsin Avenue, Northwest, 7th Street, Northwest, and 14th and U Street, which includes Adams Morgan, Mount Pleasant, and Columbia Heights. Although you hear long stretches of commercial corridors, it is not the entirety of the corridor or that road that is eligible. So to check for eligibility, and you'll hear me echo this a little bit later in this presentation, please go to greatstreets.dc.gov, Great Streets, GREATSTREETS.dc.gov, And on there, you'll see a tab that says corridor maps. You can go ahead and click on the Great Streets corridor map, enter your address, and it'll let you know if you are within the defined boundaries of one of our Great Street corridors. So for the purposes of this RFA, consumer goods are defined as goods that are immediately consumed in one use or have a lifespan of less than 3 years. So some examples, not an exhaustive list, include cosmetics, cleaning products, food, fuel, beer, spirits, some household items, paper products, rubber, textiles, clothing, footwear, and of course, PPE. Some durable goods and how we define it here is home appliances, consumer electronics, furniture, sports equipment, and children's toys. So what makes a great proposal? A responsive proposal should provide a strategy whereby an entity or entities of locally made would promote the development and or improvement of a shell building up to 60,000 square feet. That is a huge amount of space, 60,000 square feet. An eligible shell building project can include the redevelopment or the improvements of an existing structure, pending that the building can be done, cost effectively delivered for industrial use. The DC Locally Made Grant will support qualified small businesses for capital or tenant improvements of commercial property that's within a designated industrial use and within the boundaries of a Great Street corridor. If the project is outside of a Great Street corridor, it is not eligible for this opportunity. Finally, any building that's developed or improved because of this program should be fully completed for use by an industrial tenant or owner-occupant within 60 days following the completion of the approved improvements. So who are your eligible applicants? Well, they can include real estate developers and or existing small businesses whose core business aligns with light manufacturing and is located either within or plans to move to a Great Street corridor. The location is that the project must be within the statutory boundaries of the Great Street corridor, and that you again are encouraged to verify your location eligibility via the interactive mapping tool that's found at greatstreets.dc.gov. And again, projects located outside of qualifying Great Street corridor will not be considered. In terms of eligible funds, DC Locally Made Grant may be used for exterior and or interior improvement, including the purchase of furniture, fixtures, and equipment, and that's up to 50% of the grant can be used for that. So what are some minimum requirements? Well, we said over and over, you have to be located in the Great Street corridor. You certainly have to be a licensed business in good standing with DC's Department of Consumer Regulatory Affairs, DCRA, the Office of Tax and Revenue, OTR, the Department of Employment Services, DOES, and the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS. You must maintain your good standing status with the aforementioned entities throughout the pre-award process and the grant period of performance. You have to retain site control of the business property through either fee simple ownership, a letter of intent, or an executed contract or lease with the property owner that has a minimum unexpired term of at least 5 years. Applicants who do lease their building are required to submit a notarized affidavit from their landlord authorizing the proposed improvement project. And then you will also have to provide proof of property and liability insurance. And an insurance quote is permitted for new businesses, and it must be compliant with the requirements that are set forth in the RFA. So, who are the ineligible applicants? Well, adult entertainment, auto body repair, banks, bars and nightclubs, the construction, general contracting, architectural, design, build, e-commerce business. So e-commerce businesses, let me just make a note. If you do not have a retail presence that you might be doing, as COVID has certainly influenced, a lot of our retailers have a strong e-commerce business or channel. If that is your only channel, and you plan to keep that as your only channel without selling in a brick and mortar, whether one that you own or as part of your retail strategy, you're ineligible for this particular opportunity. Financial services, home-based businesses, hotels, liquor stores, phone stores, professional services, property management, realtor, your seasonal businesses only open part of the year, and any previously awarded business that from Great Streets that is simply relocating their business and they have met the $150,000 threshold of funding from Great Streets or H Streets grants programs are not eligible. Ineligible funding uses, well, the grant cannot be used for debt or expenses associated with preparing the application, inventory, legal fees, marketing, payroll, rent, and any expenses that's not listed as eligible above. So what will you be evaluated on? What is the scoring criteria? Applications will be evaluated based on the following criteria. Now, certainly failure to demonstrate how the proposed project meets the criteria may reduce the application score. We are really interested in two core spaces. One is the content requirement, meaning that the application has to provide sufficient information for the agency to make a determination of the merit of the proposal, and a complete application. Application should include the elements for each section for them to be eligible for the maximum consideration. And applications that fail to include all of the necessary elements may not be reviewed or considered and may be disqualified. In terms of our scoring criteria to evaluate the submission, it will include but is not limited to the quality and functionality of the building proposed, the sufficiency of the major participants, which is defined in the RFA, the experiences of the individuals and or firms, the economic development impact of the proposed project, the strength of the financial proposal, the location of the proposed site, and the level of site control that's established. Certainly the project's readiness, the risk level to the partnership and or individual entity participating, the ability to scale that relationship to additional projects, and the return on investment timeline are all elements that will be considered for your submission. In terms of the application overview, we are asking that the application be submitted in PDF format unless otherwise requested. The application will be evaluated based on the criteria outlined below, and certainly failure to demonstrate how the proposed project meets these criteria may reduce the application score. Now, applications should be prepared on 8.5 by 11-inch page format. Well, Stephanie, why would you say that? Sometimes individuals may select the A4 format thinking it's similar. It isn't, so we just want to make sure that your application can actually be properly read and reviewed. We also ask that you use 11 or 12-point Arial, Calibri, or Times New Roman font and submit your application through Gifts Online. We're not taking any submissions via email. We are not doing that beforehand. We're not doing that after that. The only way forward to be considered for this application is to apply through the application link through Gifts Online. The application will include the requested information below, which is a cover page with the contact information for the applicant, the business's name, the key contact. It has the mailing address, the telephone number, and the email. And you will submit the narrative for the FY21 DC Locally Made Manufacturing Grant. The narrative is comprised of several sections. One, the executive summary, which is 10% of the score, the market and financial feasibility of the project, which is 30% of the score, the major participants' identities and details, which is 20% of the score, the proposed job creation and economic benefits, which is also 20% of the score, and the certified business enterprise commitment, which is 20% of the score. There is a statement regarding debarments, suspensions, bankruptcy, or loan defaults that is mandatory to be included. It is not school. You are to refer to the request for applications for details and guidance. In addition to the application narrative, there are several appendices and attachments that are requested. There is an arrest and conviction statement, a statement of certification, a certificate of insurance, and the debarment affidavit. Those are Appendix A, B, C, and D respectively. You have several attachments. These attachments include the basic business license, DCRA Certificate of Good Standing, and it must be issued between January 1, 2021 and March 15, 2021. So at the time of your submission, if you submit on the 15th. The Clean Hands Certificate, which also should be issued within the same parameter of time, which is January 1 through March 15, 2021. Evidence of site control, and this has to be a fully executed, unexpired lease or your deed. And certainly we have outlined some of the additional forms of site control that are acceptable. Your landlord affidavit, and this is only applicable if you're leasing. The business tax returns for the past 3 years. The annual financial statements for the past 3 years. Your job creation chart. Development pro forma financial statement. Your sources and uses. Your project budget, your major participants' resume, and a picture of the proposed project. And we encourage you for the pictures for the proposed project site that you go ahead and put it into a Word document and PDF that to help bring down the size for the submission. How are applications reviewed? Well, prior to the formal review process, there's actually 3 phases. I should say that first. There's an initial screening, an independent review panel, and a final review. So prior to the final review, the applications receive an initial administrative screening to ensure that all the required forms, signatures, and documents are present. And an application will not be evaluated by the review panel if it is received after the closing date, the application package is not complete, the project synopsis or description fails to address the program priorities, and the application doesn't fall within the scope of the RFA. Those applications that have completed their initial administrative screening will be moved forward into an independent review panel. And those applications will be reviewed externally, and that external independent review panel will submit scoring, ranking, and comments to DEMPED. There is also an internal review of the applications, and based on the external and internal review of the panel recommendations. In the final review, the mayor, considering those recommendations plus the mayor's budget priorities, the resources that are available, the goal of achieving balance as to the communities that we're going to serve, and the goals of the program, DEMPED will make a final funding decision. And the final funding decision cannot be contested or appealed. If you have any questions about this grant, they should be directed to the grants team at demped.grants@dc.gov. As this is an open solicitation and I'm the administrator over it, I am not able to respond to specific grant RFA related questions without the grants team. So it's just, please send it to demped.grants@dc.gov. Also, if you want to reach out to me and learn more about the Great Streets program, again, I'm Stephanie Thomas. I'm the director for Great Streets in Retail. And you can reach me at the program email address at greatstreets@dc.gov.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas, for a great presentation of the DC Locally Made Manufacturing Grant. As Ms. Thomas indicated in her presentation, if a business is not located within one of the Great Streets corridors that she mentioned, they will be deemed ineligible for grant funding. If you are a Minnesota Avenue business and you are on this call, you would be eligible for grace for this opportunity because the Minnesota Avenue Main Street corridor is located within one of the Grace Streets. If you're on this call and you are not a Minnesota Avenue Main Street business, and you would have to verify if you are located within one of the corridors. Ms. Thomas, how would it be able to do that?
Certainly. So the way you can verify is go to greatstreets.dc.gov, www.greatstreets.dc.gov. And there you will find across the header, the tab for corridor map. You'll click on corridor map, and there are two maps that will selections that will come up. One will be for Great Streets, the other will be for Neighborhood Prosperity Fund. You want to click on the Great Streets map, enter your address, and when you enter your address, it will pop up and say, congratulations, you're in a Great Street corridor, or that you are not in a Great Street corridor.
Great. So there you have it. This Ms. Thomas has provided you with information about the locally made manufacturing grant. At this time, we will open it up for questions and answers. You have two choices. You can either enter your question in the chat, or we can unmute your microphone and you can answer your question. So we'll just give it a couple minutes for anyone who wants to ask questions.
Looks like he's unmuted.
Mr.
Hello?
Moreland?
Yeah.
Hi, Mr. Moreland.
How are you doing? Great presentation, guys.
Thank you for joining us today. Do you have a question?
Yes. How do you define manufacturing and will it also include assembly?
Yes, you can certainly include assembly into that. We have left the definition somewhat broad to make sure that we can accommodate a number of business concerns on how they produce their goods. So because the grant does have the ability for up to 50% of it to be utilized for the purchase of equipment, furniture, and fixtures, we certainly can imagine that assembly would be a part of that.
Thank you so much.
Unmute. If anyone doesn't have any more questions, we will end the presentation. I would like to mention, for those of you who are late to the call, we have a poll. It's currently, I'm not sure if you can see it, but there's a poll. It's a 2-question poll. If you can please take a couple seconds to answer the poll. It's just 2 questions. This is the first of many information sessions that we plan to have to Minnesota Avenue businesses. We want to be able to bring information, resources, and opportunities to you in a very informal but direct way. So we just want to know from you if you think this information session was helpful and if you would like to see more. So we'll just give it an additional 2 minutes or so for you to complete the poll, and then that would be the end of our presentation. Thank you for joining.
One other question.
Sure, go ahead.
Do you have a map of the Great Streets corridors for Minnesota Avenue? Because there's a warehouse.
So I think you're asking 2 questions. So is there a map for the Great Streets corridor? Yes. And that's at Great Streets, GreatStreets. I was got to think of reading it through my head, .dc.gov. And that's where you'll find at the top of the page, they'll say corridor map. So you can check your address for that. Now, the Minnesota Avenue map is related to the Main Streets map, and you can get that information from there.
Yes. So what I will do, I will enter the address. It's called the DC Main Street Lookup Map, and I will enter that address into the chat. for you to have. And what you do, you just enter in your business address, and you'll be able to see if your address is located within a main street or not. There's approximately 26 DC main streets right now. So if your address is not located within the Minnesota Avenue main street, it might be located in one of the other main streets. If it's not located within one of the other main streets, you're not going to be in a main street. However, that does not mean that you are disqualified or you're ineligible for Great Street funds. So, it's kind of tricky, but when you use the tool, at least you'll be able to find out if you're located within a Main Street corridor. It doesn't necessarily help you with determine if you're located within a Great Streets corridor. That's why you have to use the map that Ms. Thomas just mentioned to verify if you're located in a Great Streets corridor or not.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
As well.
Stephanie, we can't hear you. Say it one more time.
I was saying that I'm about to put the web address into the chat so you can go straight away there and be able to find the corridor map and put it in. But much of the Minnesota Avenue Main Street, as my memory serves me, is within the Great Street corridor. And of course, the Main Street boundaries go from East Capitol all the way down to Manning Hill and Minnesota Avenue.
So if you give me a few minutes here, I'm pulling up the link so that I can put it in the chat. Okay. Okay, Mr. Moreland, the links have been entered into the chat. Do you have any more questions?
And if I could...
No, you all have been very helpful. Thank you so much.
So that's awesome. Thank you. Just a reminder that the request for applications close on Monday at 4 p.m. So certainly we encourage you to apply, but certainly don't want you to miss the deadline. That's what I wanted to say.
So if you don't have any more questions, we will end our presentation. And thanks again for joining. Have a good day.
Have a great day. Thank you, everyone.